How many people do you know who have been diagnosed with a mental disorder?
One.
With a mental disorder? Two.
I'm sure a couple.
I know a few.
About 3 or 4 personally.
Probably 4.
Half a dozen?
I'll say about 9.
At least a dozen.
I'll bet I could count 15.
20 that I personally know.
My oldest son is diagnosed.
My mother was diagnosed.
Kid from my childhood.
My friend, the next boyfriend.
Just my grandfather and cousins. A friend of mine, friends.
A sister, my neighbors.
2 friends.
A girlfriend. A niece. 1 friend.
My mother.
All my friends, everybody I know.
Uma aparente inundação de doenças mentais está à nossa volta. De onde é que isto vem? Os psiquiatras, cujo Manual de Diagnóstico e Estatísticas pode etiquetar qualquer pessoa que ande na Terra nos dias de hoje como sendo mentalmente doente.
Psychiatrists, I believe, they look at every human being and they divide humans into 2 classes, clients and potential clients.
We see this no more prevalent in any field than in the field of the mental disorders, where one disease after another is invented and then popularized and the public is made to worry about it.
It's disease mongering. It's the selling of sickness. You know, sometimes it's a drug in search of a market, and it's giving public awareness to minor conditions with the ultimate goal is to sell more medications. It's not caring for people.
When you run out of symptoms, you don't have any more clientele to market to. So you have to invent disease. And with psychiatric medications, you can invent diseases all day long. Look at human variation.
Everyday things like shyness, sadness, or even situational depressions like grieving, postpartum depression, they all become studied and prescriptions start to get written for these drugs.
Before these drugs were introduced in the market, people who had these conditions would not have been given any drug at all. And so it is the branding of a disease, and it is the branding of a drug for the treatment of a disease that did not exist before the industry made the disease.
Por exemplo, timidez. Uma situação comum na vida votada pelos psiquiatras para o seu Manual de Diagnósticos e Estatísticas sob o nome de desordem de ansiedade social.
You know, people are nervous. Well, they come up with, say, social anxiety disorder. SAD, they'll call it SAD.
And the connotation is that everybody ought to be happy and that here's a drug that can make you happy. So that a common occurrence, which is every now and again everybody's sad, we ought to be treating with a drug.
Well, then they'll get this PR firm to drum up business for this. They'll put out all these studies that find, you know, there's so many people afflicted with this SAD, you know, and they'll start putting it in magazines, they'll start putting it on TV, they'll start a patient advocacy group that say, you know, that we're all affected by this, and then they'll come out with Paxil works for this. So they go to the FDA and they said, well, we ran this study and this works for this new invented disorder. And that is SAD, social anxiety disorder. And millions of people suffer from it. And it's purely fictional. It's a normal human emotion that everybody experiences at certain times or another, but they make it into a disease.
Paxil, once it got approved by the FDA as the first antidepressant to be used for social anxiety, it took off huge. And it just moved from number 3 in the market amongst its peer drugs to number 1 in the market.
A desordem de ansiedade social é só mais uma das muitas desordens psiquiátricas inventadas que alimentam o crescimento da prescrição de drogas psicotrópicas.
Psychiatrists work to promote what the latest disease is going to be. These days, bipolar is getting that same type of promotion.
Everybody's being educated about their bipolar illness, when in fact, we know having emotional ups and downs is distinctly human.
Now bipolar is thrown around like water. You've got bipolar, I have bipolar. If I'm up today, I'm manic. If I go home tonight and I'm depressed because I'm tired, that shows I have bipolar disease. It's a lot of hokum.
Yeah, I see a lot of things on television about bipolar.
Bipolar? You know, they talk about bipolar a lot.
My oldest son was diagnosed with bipolar.
Bipolar. I've known a lot of bipolar.
2 friends from both of them were like diagnosed with bipolar.
Some people I know that are bipolar.
My neighbor, she was bipolar. I was diagnosed with bipolar.
My mother had bipolar.
He was actually bipolar.
Schizophrenic bipolar. Bipolar and obsessive compulsive.
Bipolar and ADHD.
Bipolar disorder.
Bipolar, yeah.
Bipolar situation.
Bipolar. Bipolar.
Bipolar.
Bipolar.
Bipolar.
There are 3 personality disorders, and then the most recent is bipolar. And that's just been in the past year.
Liderando a popularização da desordem bipolar, especialmente nas crianças, está o psiquiatra Dr. Joseph Biederman, um orador pago, conselheiro e pesquisador para 25 companhias farmacêuticas diferentes.
In 1996, the drug companies funneled all this money to this Dr. Biederman. He's well known. He's the one that came up and said that there's bipolar disorder in little kids. This was unheard of. There was no bipolar disorder in any kids. He came up with the study and published the articles out all over the world, and other doctors followed his lead that bipolar is in little kids.
Devido à constante promoção do Dr. Biederman e dos seus colegas, houve um aumento de 4000% do diagnóstico de bipolar nas crianças desde 1994. Enquanto o número de antipsicóticos que lhes foram prescritos aumentou 5 vezes para cerca de 2,5 milhões de prescrições. Em 2008, o Dr. Biederman foi exposto por uma investigação do Senado por falhar em reportar 1,6 milhões de dólares em receitas pessoais de companhias farmacêuticas. Mas o prejuízo fora feito. Devido à moda bipolar criada pelo Dr. Biederman, os antipsicóticos, algumas das mais perigosas drogas psicotrópicas a serem prescritas, são as drogas de escolha da psiquiatria. Os 3 antipsicóticos que mais vendem, juntos, geram $25 mil a cada minuto. E não importa quão grande a indústria de drogas psicotrópicas seja, os psiquiatras estão a trabalhar arduamente para providenciar os diagnósticos para a fazer ainda maior.
Let's say this is the pie right here of a certain class of medications, and this is a pretty profitable pie and everybody wants a piece of that pie. But what would happen if we made that pie even bigger? And how you make the pie even bigger is by expanding the uses for those drugs.
They've already got a drug that's approved on the shelf. They can just pull it off the shelf, rename it, repackage it, and say, look, we've got a new drug for a new illness.
When Prozac's patent ran out, that Eli Lilly had to look for a new source of profits. So all they did was change the name of the drug from Prozac to Serafem, changed the color of the pill from green to pink, and marketed it for PMDD, which is newly introduced into this book.
What it tells us is that if you can come up with a label, a diagnostic label for a drug, then you can sell it like hotcakes.
It's a business model, and it's a billion-dollar business model, and it works, and it's going to keep continuing.
Nos dias de hoje, qualquer pessoa pode estar a tomar uma droga psiquiátrica sem o saber, que tenha sido renomeada, voltada a empacotar e prescrita para propósitos não psiquiátricos. Ziban, prescrita como uma cura para o tabagismo, é na realidade o antidepressivo Wellbutrin. Cymbalta, uma droga psiquiátrica para a depressão e a ansiedade, é agora comercializada como Ientreve para a incontinência urinária. Os pesquisadores psiquiátricos estão a testar drogas psicotrópicas numa ampla variedade de condições, tais como obesidade, alcoolismo, vício do jogo, calores, herpes, náuseas, comichões, tremores e queda de cabelo excessiva. É um comprimido para cada doença. E não se diz a praticamente ninguém o quão perigosas são as drogas psiquiátricas.
As a chemist, I'm making these drugs. They're proving deadly in our labs, and they're proving deadly in other labs. Dangerous, ineffective, causing the exact same thing they're supposed to treat. How are they selling them?
For anyone who's given a label of a psychotic illness, drugs seem to be the automatic choice of treatments as night follows day.
That's all psychiatry does. It's dominated by psychopharmacologists who do nothing but manage symptoms by dispensing pills. That's it. And they don't work. But the fact that they don't work works to the advantage of the drug companies and the psychiatrists, which means that you're not cured, which means that you're a patient for life, you're a customer, you're a client for life. And the worse your health gets, the more drugs you need. It's a great deal for them.
We should all be up in arms about the way we're being treated by psychiatry today. This is a very dangerous industry that has gone so far overboard in inventing fictitious diseases and drugging our children and our population that I consider it to be engaged in crimes against humanity.
Com mais de 80 milhares de milhões de dólares anuais em orçamentos para drogas psiquiátricas em jogo, é impossível escapar à saturação de doenças psiquiátricas vendidas na sociedade atual. Mas por detrás do marketing, os clientes psiquiátricos ficariam chocados ao saber como é que estas drogas são testadas. E são seguras?